time has finally come for a full entire bookshelf tour that I've been promising for quite some time now. I have quite a lot of books, so it will probably be in several parts, probably 3, but we'll just get started and see how it goes. So starting with this lovely top shelf, first we have the His Dark Materials series by Philip Pullman. The first book in the series is The Golden Compass. The second one is The Subtle Knife. And the third one is The Amber Spyglass. I think that's the whole series, but when I start reading it, I will probably double check that. Next up, we have the Inheritance series by Christopher Paolini. The first book in that series is Aragon, and the second one is Eldest. I do believe there's more books in the series, but I will have to find them. After that, I have The Game of Thrones by George R.R. Martin. This is the first book in the Song of Ice and Fire, and it looks like this, and this is actually the Bulgarian edition. It was a present. Next up, we have some of the Sookie Stackhouse books by Shirlene Harris, and here we have A Touch of Dead, which is all the short stories in one bind-up. Dead to the Family, which is the last book from the series that I have. After this one, there's several more that I just don't have yet. And the Sookie Stackhouse Companion, which I still haven't read. Next up, we have The Coldest Girl in Cold Town by Holly Black. And this is a book that just recently came out, and I really enjoyed it. This one is a standalone as of right now, but there were rumors that there might be a sequel in the future. Next up, we have the Throne of Glass series by Sarah J. Maas, with the first book, Throne of Glass, and the second one, Crown of Midnight. I actually like the new covers much better than the old ones, but at least when they're next to each other, they still look like they belong together. Next up, we have Etiquette and Espionage by Gail Carriger, and the second book actually comes out in a couple of days, so I would have to find a space for it. Next up, we have Saving Angel by Jennifer Whale, and this is a book that I actually edited, and I'm very happy with it. And it is a great series. They have new covers now, but I really like this old, I guess, cover because it's just what brought me to this series to begin with. Next up, we have 2 of the books in the Nightshade series by Andrea Kramer. The first one that I have is Rift, and the second one is Wolfsbane. This is actually the sequel to Nightshade. Nightshade is the first one, and I do not have it yet, so I have not read this series yet, even though I've had it for a while now. The next one is Elixir by Hilary Duff, and I did read this book a while ago. It's a standalone. It was pretty interesting, I'd say. Next up is The Eternal Ones by Kirsten Miller, and this is a book that I got from the bargain bin in Amazon, and I haven't read it yet. Next up, we have a book from the Flapper series by Gillian Larkin, and this one is called Vixen. Again, I don't have all the books in the series. It's a series. There's more than one book. This one is not even the first one, or it might be, I don't know, but I haven't read it yet. Next up, we have Bright Young Things by Anna Godberson, and this is yet another book that I haven't read yet. Next up, we have book 2 in the Relic Master series by Catherine Fisher, and this one is called The Lost Hairs. I don't have the first one, so I haven't started reading this series either. And the next one is Awakened by Meg Cabot, which is, I believe, the third one in the Abandoned series. And then, since I'm running low on space, I also had to put some books up there. So the first 2 are The Iron Legends by Julie Kagawa. This is a compilation of the short stories in the Iron Face series, so I have not read them yet because I don't have the rest of the series. And the next one is Promised by Cara O'Brien, which is, I believe, the second book in the series, which I also have not read. The next 2 are Outpost by Anna Guire, and this is the second book in the Enclave series. I don't have Enclave, so I haven't read this one yet. The next one is The Space Between Trees by Katie Williams, and this has a really cool cover. Like, you open it and I think this is the reason why I got it, because of the cover. Not even gonna lie, but yeah, I haven't read it yet. And last but not least, we have 2 books from the Fireflight series by Sophie Jordan, and again, this is a series that I have books in the middle but not like the first book, so I haven't started reading it yet. But the books that I do have are Vanish and Hidden. Moving on to the second shelf. First up we have the Rochelle Mead little section, and then the second half is Cassandra Clare. So in the Rochelle Mead section there is Game Board of the Gods, which is I believe an adult novel. It's a new series called Game of X or Age of X or something like that. And this is the first book and I haven't read it yet, although I've been meaning to read it. After that we have the Vampire Academy series, which I absolutely love. With the first one, Vampire Academy, the second one is Frostbite, the third one is Shadow Kiss, the fourth one is Blood Promise, the fifth one is Spirit Bound, the sixth one is Last Sacrifice, and this is the last one in the Vampire Academy series. And I also have the Vampire Academy Ultimate Guide, which I actually have read. It's pretty interesting. Next up we have the spin-off series from the Vampire Academy, and it's called Bloodlines. So far there are 3 books out, although the fourth one comes out in just a couple of days and I'm very excited to read it. So the first one is Bloodlines, the second one is The Golden Lily, and the third one is The Indigo Spell. That is yet more books by Rochelle Mead that I absolutely love. And this is also the place where I keep my diplomas. I have my high school diploma, my AA, and my BA. So I don't know why, but this is where they stay for some reason. Okay, next up starts the Cassandra Clare half of the shelf, and I have the Shadowhunters and Downworlders compilation, which is basically a compilation with essays about the Shadowhunter world, and they're written by various YA authors, and they have introductions by Cassandra Clare. It's actually really interesting. I enjoyed reading it. So next up we have the Mortal Instruments series, with the first one being City of Bones, City of Ashes, City of Glass, City of Fallen Angels, and City of Lost Souls. The last one, City of Heavenly Fire, comes out in a couple months, the beginning of 2014, and I can't wait to read it. Okay, next up we have the Infernal Devices series, which is actually what I read first, and then I read the Mortal Instruments. The first one is Clockwork Angel, the second one is Clockwork Prince, and the last and third one is Clockwork Princess. This was a series that I absolutely loved reading. I also have the first 2 graphic novels in the Infernal Devices series. So that's again Clockwork Angel and Clockwork Prince. I have not read the graphic novels yet, but I will be reading them soon, I hope. So above my Infernal Devices books I have Untold by Sarah Breeze Brennan, and it is from the Labyrinth Legacy series. This one basically consists of a whole bunch of mass paperbacks. This is the only shelf that I have double stacked. Okay, so this is the back row. Basically these here and here are romance novels, and there's some mysteries over there, and I will not go through all of them because they are actually, most of them are in a haul that I did, a random haul, which I can link down below, as well as any reviews and other stuff like that from the books that I've shown you. So with that in mind, let's start with this first row. So I have Gunmetal Magic by Elena Andrews. I believe this is an adult series that I have not read because this is not the first book in the series. And this is another one by the same author. It's called Steel's Edge, and again I believe it's an adult series or book, but I have not read it yet. The next couple ones are some of the books from Charmed. I love the TV show Charmed, and a friend of mine also loves it, so she gave me all these books to read, and I have read some of them but not all of them. So I have Whispers from the Past, Kiss of Darkness, The Gypsy Enchantment, Voodoo Moon, The Crimson Spell, Power of Three, and Haunted by Desire. I should probably say that most of my mass paperbacks are in fact adult series. I don't know why and how that happened, but oh well. So the top 2 books are actually from the same series, An Elemental Assassin by Jennifer Estep. The first one is Spider's Bite, and the second one is Web of Lies. Next up we have 2 books by Kalena Price in the Alex Craft series. The first one is Grave Witch, and the second one is Grave Memory. Actually, they might even go the other way around. I'm not sure because, again, I have not read this series. Next up we have Endgame by Anne Aguirre. Archangel's Storm, not really sure how to say that, by Nalini Singh, and it is from the Guild Hunter series. Next up we have The Vampire Chronicles by Anne Rice, and that is Interview with the Vampire, The Vampire Lestat, Queen of the Damned, and The Tale of the Body Thief. The next one is actually an anthology by Janine Frost, Shayla Black, and Sherry Kohler, and it's called Haunted by Your Touch. And the next one is Dead and Gone by Shirlane Harris, which is part of the Sookie Stackhouse series. Okay, next up we have the Song of Ice and Fire books. The first one being A Game of Thrones. The next one is A Clash of Kings, A Storm of Swords, and A Feast of Crows. Now there is another one, a fifth one, that has in fact come out, but I don't have it yet because I was waiting for the one that's in this edition, because I like my books to match. And the last two books from the bottom part of the shelf are Mortal Dies by Eileen Wilkes and Dracula by Bram Stoker. Moving on to the top row. The first one is an anthology by Kim Harrison, Melissa Marr, Janine Frost, Vicky Peterson, and Jocelyn Drake, and it's called Unbound. The next few books are from the Night Hunter series by Janine Frost, starting with Halfway to the Grave, One Foot in the Grave, an anthology by Maggie Shane, Janine Frost, Derry Gary, and Catherine Smith called Weddings from Hell, At Grave's End, another anthology by Kathy Maxwell, Elaine Fox, Janine Frost, Sophia Nash, Tracy Ann Warren called Four Dukes and a Devil, Destined for an Early Grave, First Drop of Crimson, Eternal Kiss of Darkness, This Side of the Grave, One Grave at a Time, an anthology by Lindsay Sands and Janine Frost called The Bite Before Christmas, Once Burned, Twice Tempted. Okay, next up we have more of the Sookie Stackhouse books. The first one is called Dead Until Dark, Living Dead in Dallas, Club Dead, Dead to the World, Dead as a Doornail, Definitely Dead. Do you see a theme here? Altogether Dead, and From Dead to Worse. Next up we have The Craving by Gina Showalter and The Lord of the Rings by J.R.R. Tolkien. The first one, The Hobbit, Part 1, The Fellowship of the Ring, Part 2, The Two Towers, and Part 3, The Return of the King. And that concludes that shelf. Let's move on to this last shelf for this part of the bookshelf tour. So the first one on the shelf is Siege and Storm by Leigh Bardugo. Next up we have the Raised by Wolves series by Jennifer Lynn Barnes. There is one more book that I don't have in the series, but the first one is Raised by Wolves, and the second one is Trial by Fire. Next up we have the Revenant series by Amy Plum, and I still haven't read the third one, but I will read it soonish, hopefully. So the first one is Die For Me, the second one is Until I Die, and the third one is If I Should Die, and this is the one that I haven't read yet, so I don't even know how the series ends. Next up we have the Selection series by Kiera Cass, the first one being The Selection, and the second one, The Elite. The third one, The One, is coming out next year, and I can't wait, honestly, I can't wait to see how it ends. Next up we have the Defiance series by C.J. Redwine, and this actually has a different name, but I can't remember what it is right now, so let's just go with the Defiance series. With the first book being Defiance, and the second one, which only recently came out, being Deception. Next up we have the White Rabbit Chronicles by Gina Showalter, and I actually don't have the second book here because I lent it to a friend to read. But the first book is Alice in Zombieland, the second one is Through the Zombie Glass. This is a series that I really enjoy reading. Next up we have the Paranormalcy series by Kirsten White, with the first book being Paranormalcy, Supernaturally, and Endlessly. And over here we have the Hunt series by Andrew Fukuda, and the first one is The Hunt, and this is the older cover, and the second one is The Prey, which is with the newer cover, and I actually like both kinds of covers, and their spines match when they're next to each other, so that makes me happy. But the third one, The Trap, comes out in November, and I can't wait to read it. Next up we have the Delirium trilogy by Lauren Oliver, with the first one, the Delirium. The second one is Pandemonium, and the third one is Requiem. I also have the compilation of the short stories, and I really did enjoy the series a lot. And over here we have the Wolves of Mercy Falls series by Maggie Stiefvater, starting with Shiver, Linger, and Forever. And again, I've had to stop this top part with books. Okay, so in the first part, we have two of the Ranger's Apprentice books by John Flanagan. The first one, The Ruins of Gorlan, and the fifth one, The Sorcerer of the North. Next up, I have three books from the Evernight series by Claudia Gray, with the first one being Evernight. I think this is the second one, it's called Stargazer, and I think this is the fourth one called Afterlife. I don't have the third one, and I believe there's more after this one. Next up, I have a couple of Blue Bloods books by Melissa de la Cruz. So I have Bloody Valentine, Keys to the Repository, Misguided Angel, and Lost in Time. Again, that's another series that I don't have all the books of. I just have little bits and pieces here and there, so I haven't started reading it yet. And I also have Scarlet by A.C. Gauguin. I'm not sure how to say the last name, but this is a series. The second one comes out next year, and it's a Robin Hood story, just told in a different way. It's actually really enjoyable. And on the other side, I have two of the Ugly series by Scott Westerfeld. I have the second one, Pretties, and the third one, Extras. I don't have the first one yet, so I haven't started reading them. And then the other two are actually just dust jackets, because I just recently read the books, so I haven't put them back yet. The Ruby Red trilogy by Kirsten Gier, and the first one is Ruby Red, and the third one is Emerald Green. The second one, Sapphire Blue, I just also read, but that one is in my birthday haul, which books I haven't found place for yet. So apparently I lied, I always get confused with my bookshelves, but these are in fact the last two bookshelves. Now the bottom one, really quickly I'm gonna tell you, is basically just a whole bunch of mixed large size books and books that are from school. I don't even know why I keep my school books here, but I just can't make myself put any of my novels on the bottom shelf. I don't know why, so my school books go there instead to fill the space, basically. So after all that mumbo jumbo, let's move on to this shelf. This shelf is, I don't even know how to explain it, but it's a mix of books, like non-YA and some contemporary books over there in that corner, and just books that didn't feel like putting in my fantasy world books everywhere else. The first book is Platinum by Alicia King, Very Valentine by Adriana Trigiani, not sure how to say that. Nora Roberts Land by Ava Miles, and this was actually, I won that from a Goodreads giveaway, I believe. And this is the first book in the Dare Valley series. Too Far by Rich Shapiro, which has a really cool looking cover. Burn Marks by Sarah Poretsky. Beautiful Miscellaneous by Dominic Smith. Next up I have two books by Eva Ibbotson, A Company of Swans and A Countess Below Stairs. Now these are historical type books and it's not a series, they're both standalones. Next up I have Dawn of the Dreadfuls by Steve Hawkinsmith, which is like a prequel type book to Pride and Prejudice and Zombies, which is in fact the next book on my shelf, and I have not read it yet. Next up I have two copies of Once Upon a Prince by Rachel Hawke, and this is the first book in the Royal Wedding series. This is another book that I won in a Goodreads giveaway, and accidentally, I don't even know how it happened, but they sent me two copies, so I have to follow up with them and see what to do with the second copy. Next up is The Friendship Test by Elizabeth Noble. The next one is Dance with Wings by Amelia Carr, and this is a book that I got in Cape Town 3 years ago and I still haven't read it. Next up is The Wishing Trees by John Shars, and this is another book that I won in a giveaway It wasn't from Goodreads, it was actually on Library Thing, which is kind of like an online library website. Next up is The Art of Devotion by Samantha Bruce Benjamin. Next up is The Queen's Dollmaker by Christine Trent. This is a historical novel and I really enjoyed it. Next up is My Worst Best Friend by Diane Sheldon. And this is yet another book that I've won from a giveaway. Unfortunately, I haven't read it yet. I had started it a while ago, but it seemed like too teenagey for me even then. So I kind of put it aside for another time. And that time still hasn't come. Next up is Girls on Film by Zoe Dean, and this is, I think, the second book in a series. I have not read it yet. Next up, I Was Jane Austen's Best Friend by Corey Harrison, another historical novel. I haven't read it yet, but it seemed really interesting when I picked it up. Next up, The Humming of Numbers by Johnny Senso. I don't even know what this is about, but I got it a really long time ago and I still haven't read it. Next up, Three Willows by Anne Brashares, who is also the author of Sisterhood of the Traveling Pants. Next up, Eat, Pray, Love by Elizabeth Gilbert. I have watched the movie and I liked it, so I decided to pick up the book. Next up we have a couple of John Green books, starting with Looking for Alaska, which I really liked. Actually, I really like all of John Green's books. The next one is An Abundance of Catherines, Paper Towns, and last but not least, The Fault in Our Stars, which is going to be a movie next year and I'm very excited to see it. Next up is Wintertown by Stephen Amond, and this is actually a combination of stories and graphics, and I'm very excited to read it, although I haven't yet. But hey, winter's coming, maybe I should read it during winter time. And the next one is The Perks of Being a Wallflower by Stephen Chbosky, and I really enjoyed this book very much. And apparently a shelf of mine is not full unless this space is filled up, so the books that I have here are The Shack by Paul Young, which I haven't read yet, Gotham Diaries by Tony Lewis Lee and Crystal McCrary Anthony. Next up is Hot Legs by Susan Johnson, and another Goodreads giveaway win, The Wishing Thread by Lisa Van Allen, and this one is actually an advanced copy, which is why it doesn't have the actual cover. Next up is Seaborn Women by B.J. Mountford. Okay, next up we have Bullet by Lauren Hamilton, and apparently it's a novel in the Anita Blake series, which I don't really know anything about. And this concludes this part of the bookshelf tour.